Afternoon. How's everyone? I'm going to start with a couple of questions. How many of you have deployed an Azure Stack Hub integrated system? Okay, a few. How many of you have completed the Azure Stack Hub operator certification? Okay, good, a couple. And how many went to VJ's session on Tuesday? Okay, good. So the reason I tell you that, I do have some slides that overlap with VJ, and that's merely from completeness. I won't spend too time on them, but when you get this deck afterwards, I wanted to make sure we cover everything related to the operator. My name is Daniel Savage. I'm a program manager in the Azure Stack Hub. Got to keep remembering to say Hub now that we've renamed it. Engineering team. I look after the team that owns our operational, security, and support and diagnostic scenarios. So that's everything from monitoring, how we do updating, our security posture, our user interfaces, the portal and PowerShell, how we do data center integration, and then how we do logging and diagnostics in the context of getting support for the system. What I want to take you through today, it's kind of like an operator 101. I want to make sure I'm kind of covering the basic things that you need to be doing as an operator. I'll talk about some lesson learned and some best practices in that. Then I want to talk a little bit about our security posture and making sure you completely understand the security posture of Azure Stack Hub. Critically important you understand what we do and how the system's architected when it relates to security. So we get started talking about operating Azure Stack Hub. First of all, just to level set on the context of what Azure Stack Hub actually is. It is our completely autonomous cloud. So what does that mean? That it means is we are bringing Azure services in the Azure control plane to your data center so that you can run and build applications in the same way that you would in Azure. We bring those Azure services which layer on top of IaaS capabilities, and we also bring a marketplace which opens up the ecosystem of software that's available to run on Azure Stack. Most importantly, probably for this session, is the fact that we deliver this as an integrated system. So it is a hardware and software appliance that we set the configuration, we understand how it's deployed, and when it shows up into your data center, it gets deployed, and it just starts to work. So then from, excuse me, from an operator perspective, the things that you're going to be focusing on once the system is deployed, you're going to be focused on monitoring, making sure that the system is healthy, both from a software and a hardware perspective. You're going to have to keep it up to date. We release updates on a monthly cadence to Azure Stack to keep the cadence with the cloud. You'll be responsible for taking those updates and applying them successfully. You'll be creating services and content. Part of your job as an operator is to set up the services that your tenants and your users are going to use to build and deploy applications. Ensuring the system's backed up, understanding the security posture, and of course managing the capacity. And by managing the capacity, I'm making sure that what I'm running on there, I'm not running out of space, and I'm expanding as necessary. Now, we use the term operators and not administrators. So why is that? Well, first of all, because we pre-configured the system, when you think about a traditional administrator, their job is to configure, tune, make sure things are working correctly. We've done all that work on your behalf, and we're exposing the ability for you to operate it through well-defined interactions. And we do this really to satisfy that security need, right? When administrators get targeted, they get the keys to the system to kind of do whatever they like. So how do we do this? So we provide this constrained operator experience. You do not have domain admin credentials to the systems that run within Azure Stack. That is completely locked. We provide you a set of interfaces that you interact with to administer the system. Some of the principles to think about in the context, and these are the principles we think about when we build these features within my team and deliver them to you. First of all, the monitoring principle. Each alert that we build within the system, we work with the teams who are building the software components that make up part of Azure Stack. We really want them to build remediations with each alert. So that means when we do raise a fault within the system, we're providing known steps for how you remediate the system back to a good working state. And the reason, and through that, there's a reason we only have two types of alerts. We only have warning and critical alerts. And the way to think about this, when we talk to the teams about building this, a critical alert means that I want to wake someone up in the middle of the night. okay? So that's the kind of lens we put on it. And a warning, that's you have to deal with it, but it can happen kind of during normal business hours. The second principle is Azure Stack should be integrated into your data center. Azure Stack isn't a management platform. It's a cloud control platform. So you integrate it with the existing workloads you have within your system. So that means that when you get alerts in the system, you're flowing it into your ticketing system to either generate tickets or to drive automation. Okay, and we have solutions that I'll talk a little bit about later for integrating with things like Operations Manager. We have Nagios plugins, and of course you can do this via regular PowerShell or our APIs. So to explain these interfaces, so we kind of think about two main scenarios. First is sunny day. This is really when the system is running as expected. Okay, and you're going to be interfacing with Azure Stack through two main portals. First of all, the user portal. This is the user portal that is consistent with Azure. And this is where your users are going to be deploying and configuring their applications that actually run on top of Azure Stack. That user portal talks to what we call the user ARM endpoint, ARM Azure Resource Manager. That's the instantiation of our cloud model. Then the user portal, obviously, you can configure and deploy things using PowerShell or CLI. We have a secondary ARM interface which supports the administration functions or the operator functions. And on top of that, we have an admin portal, and again with a set of PowerShell so you can enable automation. On the rainy day side, and this is really okay when you're in a situation where you haven't been able to resolve an issue with Azure Stack, we have what's called the privileged endpoint. This is a GIA endpoint for PowerShell that exists in two flavors. First of all, when it's locked. So when the system is in its running normal state, the system is locked out, and as I said, you don't have domain admin credentials. You can connect to the PEP session, and you'll get a limited set of commandlets for doing things like collecting logs when there's an issue, running test Azure Stack to verify if there's anything wrong. Then we have an unlocked mode. Now, the unlocked mode is for when you're on the call with support and they want to get into the system and actually fix an issue that hasn't been able to be fixed when it's locked. When the system is unlocked, they get access to the system and they can walk you through fixing that. Critically important you understand not just what the PEP is, but how you connect to it and use it as well. So with that, I'm just going to take a quick look into the operator interfaces to make sure that you're all familiar with this. Let's log on. So those with an integrated system will be familiar with this. With those of you who haven't, this is the screen that you're going to get when you first get your Azure Stack up and running and you're looking to administer it. This dashboard's put together to try and direct you to the most minimal things you need to do. So on here we have our alerts. As you can see, we have critical and warning alerts. If we look at these critical alerts, and I'll just pick one here. Within here, when you get an alert within the system, you're going to get these remediation steps that tell you what to do to fix a particular issue. So every alert should have a set of these. In some cases, the alert may say call support, in which case that's the remediation action you would take. I'll go back here. Another thing you're going to be doing is applying updates. So we have an update tile here. In a connected, Azure Stack Hub can run in two phases. Connected, so it's actually connected to Azure, or completely disconnected and air-gapped from the public cloud. In the connected mode, updates automatically show up in here. So when there's an update available, the update will appear on this screen. And all your job is to do is to schedule the time that you want to do it, read the release notes, and then click Install Now. For those that are disconnected, you would go to the Microsoft website, you would download the update, you would put that update on some media and transfer it to your stamp, so that then you can do the same. You would upload that update into the system, and then it would show up in here and you would trigger the updates. Took a little while to load, but it came up eventually. So in here you would see what needs to be installed from an update perspective. And there's there's two types of updates that you will see within the system. The infrastructure part, which is updating the software of Azure Stack itself, and then the updates to the resource providers, and the resource providers are what enable the higher level services within Azure Stack. Both of them will show up here, and then you simply click Update to actually install them. Very important you read the release notes for any updates. We will talk about in the release notes kind of the expected time it's going to take, things that known issues, well, what maintenance you need to configure before you take the update. Another thing in here is managing capacity. So as I said, it's important that when you're in this system, you're looking at what is my usage from a compute cores perspective, from a storage perspective, from a public IP. You saw the alerts that said I'm running out of public IPs. What that means, that's critical, because if a customer's coming in and wants to deploy an application that utilizes public IPs, they're going to fail. So I need to go in here and add new IPs to the system. Another thing to look at in here is configuring backup. So we have an infrastructure backup section in here. Critically important you get your backups configured and working correctly. So the settings in here. So you're basically specifying a share outside the system, which is the backup location, the credentials to get in there, and then you specify the encryption settings from a CER certificate file. This is something that should be running on a daily basis, and then you've got to manage the share where the backups are. Last thing to look at here is marketplace management. So when we talk about your job as an operator is to curate services and make them available for your users to use, we have this marketplace management section in here. When you're in connected mode, that goes up to Azure and shows me the list of all the marketplace items I can put onto the Azure Stack system. In disconnected mode, you can sideload and add your own images into Azure Stack and make them available to your customers as well. So here we see this massive list of marketplace items. So that really kind of highlights the ecosystem you get with Azure Stack Hub. And your job is to take these items, download them, and then they will be made available. As part of your operator responsibility would be to keep checking in here for any updates to those marketplace items, ensure that you're kind of getting the newest, latest, and greatest. Now, the portal's one thing, but perhaps more importantly is being able to do almost everything that you see in the admin portal can be done via PowerShell or via REST API. One of the things we talk about from really kind of best practices and from talking to customers out there, the ability to automate everything and kind of take advantage of the things that we can do with PowerShell really helps your day-to-day. So setting up a PowerShell session, my mouse has disappeared. Where'd it go? Okay. So PowerShell version 5 and above, these instructions are all documented on our website. So again, works in connected and disconnected mode. In connected mode, you connect to the PowerShell gallery and you get the modules available from there. In disconnected, you can download the modules locally, set it up appropriately. You install the Azure RM profile and then the Azure Stack modules. The Azure RM API profile tells you what profile you're using, so that profile is consistent between Azure and Azure Stack. So let me just connect. So here I'm going to connect to an environment. So add Azure RM environment. I'm going to name it Azure Stack admin, and then I specify the ARM endpoint. You notice that ARM endpoint is similar to the portal URL. So in here, I'm in admin portal.orlando.azurestack, and in PowerShell, it's admin management.orlando.azurestack. So add that environment. The next part is to set your tenant name. We seem to get a lot of questions, people saying, I don't know where my tenant is. Okay, this here, which may not relate to my URL, but if I go back into the portal and I click on my name, hover over my name here, it will tell me the directory tenant there at the bottom. So you see it says Maz Self-Host. That's what I take and bring to my PowerShell window. Run these. Okay. And now I can sign in. It's going to give me the sign-in box. This tenant in my credentials is set up for two-factor authentication, which is supported on Azure Stack Hub, so I need to specify how I'm going to log in. Okay. There we go, and now I'm connected. Now I can run very similar things to what I was doing in the portal. So for example, get the region health. Takes a few seconds to run. Okay, so I've got a summary of what's going on in the system. Really think of that as a summary of what I see on the dashboard. I can get my active alerts. So you see the 3 alerts that I had within the portal as well. I can get region health. I can get information about the scale units. I'll just run one of these. That's the one I wasn't supposed to run. Okay. Tells me all about the system, including the capacity information on there. And then lastly, I can do things like get the updates. Now, obviously, I'm only showing you the get commands. There is things like invoke update, so you can build automation that says, get me a list of available updates, and then you can actually have that be invoked based on the automation that you could build. Okay, so that's a quick overview of the interfaces. Let me switch back. Okay, so let's just talk about operator skills. So this is what I think is like your checkbox on making sure that when you're looking to become an Azure Stack operator, you're investing in the training that supports this. Now, we started with talking about that it's not administrators, but we're using operators, but the skills that we're building here are very similar, okay? And it starts with like a fundamental knowledge of how networks work, particularly TCP/IP. I showed you the alert that says I was running out of IP space. You know, you're going to have to understand how you get an additional subnet and put that in there and how that's actually working. How does the network flow? What is a public IP space and putting that in? Okay? Not afraid to do stuff with PowerShell. Okay? Particularly when we're working on the privileged endpoint, when you're working with support. It's critically important you understand and you have a core kind of PowerShell capability that you can rely on. Knowing how to sysprep a Windows image. You know, you're going to be loading images that are going to be made available. So if you're building up your own service catalog, understanding how to sysprep and get images ready for deploying into Azure Stack. Has hypervisor experience. I'm sure you all have a hypervisor experience. You know, in Azure Stack Hub, when you deploy a virtual machine, you're going to get a list of Azure sizes, like the size of the VM, what its capabilities are. You should understand how that translates down into the hypervisor itself. Not that you can see it, but you should understand how that's working. Understand certificates, and particularly the difference between .pfx and a .cer file. Now, you saw in the infrastructure backup, I specified the encryption using a .cer file. When I do secret return, when you deploy Azure Stack, you actually specify a set of certificates in the system, okay, to secure some of the endpoints and for internal communication. When we rotate those secrets, so your company policy, you'll get a certificate that is going to go for a certain period of time and then expire. So at some point, you have to rotate those certificates. When you rotate those certificates, you have to specify the PFX file, which contains a private key. How to work with hardware, right? So what I was showing you in the portal, and I'll talk about some updates we're doing in the hardware space a little later, but you're managing the software. But it's critically important you know and you understand the tools provided by your OEM on how to ensure that the hardware is healthy. I was speaking to one of our MVPs the other day. He was talking about he went to a customer and they were complaining that Azure Stack wasn't working. Happened to go to the OEM hardware tools, found out one server was failed. There was a ton of disks, and the operator just ignored them, right? And then he's complaining about the software when the hardware clearly needs replaced. So that's critically important. And then I think the last one, and probably key, is that fundamental knowledge of of Azure, and more importantly, ARM, right? Understanding the concepts of Azure and the cloud, what ARM is, what JSON templates are, how you deploy. You know, that's really going to serve you well when you're interacting with your developers and your users who are building on top of this. So when they come to you with a failure, you can help them work through what may be wrong with their deployment. So the reason I asked about training, I think about certification, is you're looking to get on your Azure Stack Hub journey, investing in the operator certification and training is critically important. And there's many places you can do this. Start with our documentation online. This is something we are updating continuously. In fact, we review all our documentation and our support cases on a monthly basis, and then we update our documentation to make sure we're providing you the most up-to-date information. We have a set of training from some partners here. We have a 1-hour overview, which is a good start, and then we have a longer course that's available as well. The link to the exam is there. We look at the exam and we rev it as appropriate as new features come in, but I would say taking that exam is super important. And then we have things like the forums where you can provide support. And if you haven't got an integrated system and you're looking to kind of start with that training, we have what's called the Azure Stack Development Kit, which is a software download that you can run on a server that meets the configuration. And you will get the user and the admin portals, and you can start familiarizing yourself with the system. So let's look at what an operator's day looks like. We're going to be evolving the documentation to kind of really fit with this. It's like, what should I be doing as an operator? Like, if I'm going to go train an operator, what are the things that they need to be doing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and then the things that happen on demand. So daily, the most important thing is checking for alerts, both hardware and software, and taking action to remediate them based on their criticality. I can't stress that enough. So many situations with customers that they're not consuming their alerts because they haven't looked into the portal, because they haven't integrated with their ITSM, or they haven't built automation around it, right? Just because we've said it's an integrated system that's pre-configured doesn't mean as an operator you can just leave it in your data center running. You still got to check and make sure it's staying healthy and then interacting with it to make sure you're doing the remediations. Check the backup state. Right, critically important that infrastructure backup that's backing up the personality of the system, that backup's running correctly. On a weekly basis, checking capacity. So going in and making sure as people are deploying to your system, you understand what your utilization looks like and whether you need to think about ordering new hardware or expanding your system. Monthly, as I said, we deliver updates on a monthly basis, and I'll talk about some of the P&U investments in a second. But you're going to be applying those updates. You're going to be reading the release notes and then applying them appropriately. Validate the backup using ASDK. So if you have an Azure Stack system and we do an infrastructure backup to a share, you don't necessarily need another integrated system to validate that backup. You can take our developer kit, which I just talked about, and you can validate that your backup was successful on that. And that's something you should do on a monthly basis to make sure that the backup, even though it's been successful, you're actually validating that it does work. Managing the marketplace, so keeping up to date with new items that come into the marketplace or items that you've already downloaded and get updated. Reclaim storage space. So our default storage repartition is 0 days. That's the default, that we clean it up. If you decide to change it, it's obviously the highest risk, because if you do delete a storage account you want to recover, it's going to be cleaned up pretty quickly. So your company policy may dictate that you have a longer storage retention. But then you're adding to yourself the ability to kind of keep checking that you do need to reclaim space so you don't run out of storage. Okay, let's talk a little about what's new on the operator space. So first of all, automatic log collection. I'm going to demonstrate this to you in a second. So automatic log collection is the ability for us to take logs from the system internally and put them up into an Azure storage account. So when you call support and you need to get an issue resolved, the logs are already there and they can start troubleshooting it. The log collection is triggered by alerts in the system. So we have a category of alerts that when they fire, we go trigger log collection and we push that all the way up to the cloud. We will be working on features to do a similar type of functionality for disconnected environments as well, similar to what we do for backup, being able to do automatic log collection out to a share. And I'm going to show you a tool that's in preview about how we can analyze them as well. Alerts for hardware components. So I talked about the importance of understanding the hardware tools and checking for hardware health. We have done the plumbing so that those hardware alerts can actually flow up into, we use the term HRP, I probably should have changed that. It's the health resource provider, which is part of the operator portal. So those hardware alerts will flow up into the system that way. You need to check with your OEM. We've done the plumbing. The OEM actually has to enable it. So go speak to your favorite OEM out on the show floor and tell them when they're getting that feature, particularly if you have an integrated system already. Another thing we've done is eliminating alerts during the update sequence. So when an update's available and then we run through it, We're going to be suppressing all the alerts in the system. So if you have kind of linked it up to a ticketing system or external, you won't have alerts flowing out during that update thing. That feature will come in 1910, but you won't see the impact of it till the next update after that. Okay? And then another piece of feedback that we've had quite a lot is people don't know where the endpoints are to connect to their privileged endpoint. So we're creating a configuration screen within the operator portal, so you can go there, you can see your endpoints for connecting to the privileged endpoint. Right. What to do when things go wrong. So invariably, you know, it is software, it is hardware, things do go wrong. So I wanted to spend a bit of time just talking you through some of the investments we're making and the things that you can be doing as an operator to make sure that you're remediating issues as fast as you can. The first thing is you can do quite a lot before you call support. You know, and I really encourage you to read the documentation, go through some of these things, and really understand what you can do before you pick up the phone. First one, obviously, I've been talking quite a lot about this, is check your alerts, check your hardware, check your tools, and then follow any remediation actions that are actually there. The next one, and this is actually in preview, and I'm going to demonstrate this to you, is to run the on-premises diagnostics tools. So we can collect logs in the system, and what typically involved is those logs go up to support, and then they analyze them. What we're given as a capability now is that you can actually run a local set of analysis, and then it'll produce an error signature and help you narrow down where that may be. So it's really empowering you operators to do some additional diagnosis. And then the third thing, enable automatic log collection if you're connected. And if you're not connected, make sure that you understand how to actually collect log manually. And so when you're getting ready for a support case, you have the logs ready. So let me show you this. Okay. Oh. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my portal. The first thing is enablement of automatic log collection. You can find this by going to the help and support. So you go to help and support. So this page here contains a ton of information and resources about like where you can get support, the forums and things like that. We added in here recently, as I said in 1907, is this log collection. So first of all, you can do enable manual log collection. So rather than having to go to the privileged endpoint, we can actually trigger log collection from here. So when you do collect logs now, you basically specify a storage account URL, okay? It can be in Azure, or it could even be on another Azure Stack. It's just a SAS URL that's the target for it, and then you specify the time frame. And that'll manually do the log collection and make them available. But the configuration of automatic log collection, when that's enabled, so as I said, there's a class of alerts within the system that we are continually adding to all the time. When that alert is fired, we know what logs to collect. We trigger the automatic log collection, and then we push that information up to the cloud. So when you make the call to support, you just give them your storage account, and they can start analyzing it straight away. Really encourage you to turn that on if possible, but just know you can do it manually as well. And as I said, we'll be working on more features to support more of the disconnected deployments of that, so the ability to do log collection out to an external share. Yes? So the question is, do the logs contain any computer names, IP address information, and stuff like that? I believe in some cases they do. We do actually, I think we have it documented on what we actually collect in the logs. If not, we have customers can request a list of everything that we do collect within the logs. Okay. So then I want to show you something else. So this is one of the things we've learned is that when we push all the logs up to support, there's still a bit of time that takes for them to actually analyze them, go through them, and provide kind of where they think the problem is. But through doing that, what we've learned is that our support teams and our engineering teams have built up a vast amount of knowledge and queries that allow them to analyze logs. And what we thought is that, like, if we can push that down to operators so you can run some initial queries, we can help narrow down the problem faster. So this is currently in a private preview phase. If you're interested in learning more about it, please come and see me afterwards, and I can let you know how you get access to it. Right now, you're seeing it in PowerShell. As we kind of get towards releasing this properly, it's likely not to be in PowerShell. We're just kind of working out the mechanics of the user experience right now. But to walk you kind of through what we're doing here, so I have this module, which is really it downloads a tool called Kusto, which allows me to ingest logs into a database that I can query. So I run start Azure Edge Diagnostics, which kind of gets the system ready. I create a database, and then basically what I'm doing here is I'm getting the logs that I got from my system, and I'm ingesting it into that database. So let me just clear the screen here and connect to that. So I create a connection to that database. The logs are already there, and then what we will do, you'll see these commandlets. So one of the common issues that we get people calling support is I've got a user on the system, they tried to deploy a VM and the VM failed. And they get some error message in the portal and they're like, I don't know what's going on, right? So one of the what we're calling these diagnostic packs, one of the first diagnostic packs we've created is to do that VM deployment failure analysis, and this is something that you can run yourself. So the scenario is your customer's phoned you up, said my VM failed to deploy. You're like, okay, let me go take a look. You get your logs. You import them into this tool, and then you run the commandlet. Okay, so here I see, yes, it did pick up from the logs that we had a VM deployment, and it tells me the name of the resource there. So this DC1 VM failed to deploy. So then I pass that in to get further information about it. Okay, so what I first of all get with this is the stack trace of what happened when that VM failed. And you're like, well, that's not helping me. That's the same error message that I get when I look at the portal. But so what we've done, and this is the work that we're bringing, what we've learned by analysis, is actually to be able to analyze over that, and look at the other things going in the logs, and provide you with a better output to what's actually going on. So if I do the VM deployment analysis, what you're going to see here is we go through all the things that we think that could fail. So here we got the analysis output, and you see it's formatted a little better. Okay, we get we get that it did failed, and now it's telling me exactly what happened, right? So it failed to update, remove existing disks, right? And I can go down here and follow what actually happened. Okay. Yeah, so it failed to deploy the virtual disk. So now I can go back and look at my JSON template and narrow down that there was a problem actually with the disk trying to attach to that, and then kind of help analyze the problem. So this is what we call an error signature, okay? If we knew exactly what the problem was, we would do a remediation so you could fix it. When we're not sure and it's non-deterministic, we provide this error signature, which allows you to do some troubleshooting. And more importantly, if you call support, you give them this error signature, they're going to know how to help you and move you forward. So this is going to be available. This is, as I said, this is currently in preview. And we're going to try and, this is going to become part of the workflow for both connected and disconnected customers. We want this part so we can build out this knowledge so you as operators can analyze and go through those particular failures. Switch back. Okay, so preparing for a support call. So just some best practices to make sure that you're getting the best possible support from our CSS support team. Try to know remediations, browse through the deflection articles. If you don't know what deflection articles are, when you log a support case through the Azure portal, you click your product, you give it a symptom, you type in what's wrong, and what typically happens is you get a document that shows up that says, have you tried this? That's what we call a deflection article. As part, again, of our monthly review, we update those deflection articles all the time, so we're pushing knowledge to you to say, please go try this before you call support. So critically important you read those deflection articles. Try and understand if it's a software or a hardware issue. Again, looking at the OEM tools to validate whether it's hardware or software. Unless you're 100% certain it's a hardware issue, I would call Microsoft. Okay? That would just be a best practice I would follow. Do you have logs uploaded, or if not, have them collected? So have the logs ready around the time frame of what your failure was. and get ready to answer support scoping questions. So when you raise a case, CSS support are going to send you a set of questions to help narrow down what's going on. So getting prepared and having all this information together is really going to help you remediate things. So this is a slide I did steal from Vijay's deck. He presented on Tuesday. For those who weren't there, I'm not going to cover too much about it. This just covers the investments we've made in our patch and update system. So we deliver updates in two forms, a full update and express update. The difference being an express update doesn't update the host operating system, so it takes less time. And we're working on a multitude of investments to make both of these get to the point where you don't have to specify a maintenance window for your workloads that are running on Azure Stack. For the express update, we hope to get there in 1910. For those of you who don't know what 1910 means, that's the year and the month, so 2019 October, not quite released yet, but we're working on it. And then no downtime for full updates in the first half of next calendar year. And we continue to look at the telemetry and going through the problems that we're getting just to make this thing the most robust it can be in the context of updating your system. Right. So that's the operating best practices, getting ready for support. A lot of knowledge in there. Very hard to cover it in depth in 45 minutes, but there's a lot of links in there for you to read. I want to spend the next part talking about the security posture of Azure Stack. And before I get into that, I just wanted to kind of bring a customer testimonial to this. So I've talked a lot about Azure Stack connected and disconnected. In disconnected, as you can probably imagine, that we get a lot of customers who exist in the government space or controlled by a certain set of regulations and kind of really quite tight regulations of how they run Azure Stack. This is just a testimonial from a partner about how they were able to get their Azure Stack system running, meet their security needs, and being able to kind of really get their certifications in a really fast time compared to kind of general purpose type things. So it's a real testament to a couple of things. One, that Azure Stack can meet the needs of kind of secure, disconnected, compliant regulations. And two, that is we have a security posture that's actually been validated out there in real time. So where did our security posture come from? So before, kind of pre-cloud, what you would do, and I'm sure all of you have done this, you would take some hardware, you deploy an operating system on it, get some middleware, develop your applications, deploy them to that. Then what you had to do is build your processes around securing this, like how do you update it, how do you do management, which is great, and I'm sure everyone's fantastic with this, but I guarantee not one or not two of these were the same. They're all different. You get opinions on what's the best way to do it, duplications. So as we looked at building out Azure Stack Hub, we wanted to take a different approach, which is to create a certified solution, which starts with the cloud infrastructure, layer on our IaaS platform, which we take from Azure. Azure Stack, at its core, is an IaaS platform, okay, for running virtual machines, and the goodness of what you get with IaaS, which kind of elevates it above virtualization. And then we have the PaaS services, so the ability to build more modern applications on top of it. What we do, and this is really what my team work on, is kind of priming up with these predefined validated processes for the security posture, for doing updates, for doing management. And we think that leads to a hardened infrastructure because we've got well-defined hardware and software. We've got those well-defined interactions and well-defined administration. And that, we hope, results in great security operations, and that customer testimonial, I think, backs that up. But what's important for you as an operator is to understand this difference, like the above and below line, right? So below the line is the Azure Stack infrastructure. So that's all our software components that we put on the system that allows you to build applications, right? Now that, as much as the picture is pretty and you can go look at it, that's internal to the system, right? We don't really we're going to be evolving that. We've talked about some of the work we're doing to evolve our infrastructure towards containers. So we're continually looking at the best technologies we can make so our infrastructure runs as best as we can. So we don't really need you to understand that. We need you to understand how you interact with that. But more importantly, from a security standpoint, is you've got the user space, right? And this is where your workloads are deployed, exactly the same as they would be deployed in Azure, and that's your responsibility. So the bottom part's defined by us. We take the industry best practices around hardening and assume breach, okay? Your responsibility is to manage that. But when you deploy applications, that security posture, how you patch your VMs, how you make sure that your application is secure, that's your responsibility. Exactly the same as you would be deploying in any other cloud. So hardened by default, what does that mean? So rather than giving you a system and saying, here's a manual with 1,000 steps, We're doing all that work, taking the best practices from around the industry, from what's going on in Azure, and we create that system that's production ready. And it all starts at the bottom, so we've got various capabilities we take advantage of in the hardware root of trust, so from secure boot, UEFI, TPM 2.0. We reduce the software attack surface reduction. First of all the operating systems we apply in there are secured using a baseline, security OS baseline, which is loosely based on a DISA STIG. For those of you who don't know DISA, it's a government that's kind of specify how your system should be configured to work in a secure environment. We're doing this by default on every Azure Stack system, so you get the benefits of that. We remove unnecessary components, the components and protocols that aren't being used, we turn off, you know. Not that you need to know, like I said, but we are built right now from the 1908 update on Windows Server 2019, which means we can take advantage of some of their security features, which is things like code integrity, anti-malware, and then we do all of the ACLing and support around the network to make sure that's secure. From a secrets and sensitive data, everything is BitLockered. On the storage side, we do network encryption TLS 1.2. We use Kerberos for strong authentication, and as I talked about, the secrets rotation, a large part of doing any security administration is making sure you're rotating the secrets so that if they get compromised, you can actually rotate and not have someone get access. So we have an automated system to rotate the secrets that you initiate as an operator. Okay, assume breach. So this is where they build the system is like we want to make sure that if something did get compromised in the system, there's no lateral movement, right? So what we're kind of trying to say is that like when I have a component that needs to talk to another component in the system, it can only talk to that component. So as I said, we have the ACLs, we prevent the lateral movement, we use a principle of least privilege wherever we can. And then we have these predefined interfaces. So PowerShell, the GIA endpoint, means that we can strain down how you can actually interface with the system. I'll talk very quickly about compliance. Got 2 minutes left. As you know, for getting systems compliant, the real power of the Azure Stack Hub system, as I said, is it's a cloud that you run on your data center. Okay, so for meeting the needs of compliance and regulatory needs is a critically important use case for Azure Stack. For getting compliance, it's not just about the software, there's the people and the processes as well. So we actually work with third-party assessments, independent third-party firms that do assessments of Azure Stack. So they do assessments, they do penetration testing, and then they produce reports for you all to kind of consume. So we provide the technology controls guidance, and we've validated for Azure Stack Hub up to FedRAMP High. We've got documentation around that. We have the CSA Cloud Control Matrix and the PCI DSS assessment and report. All of these are available on our Trust Center, and it's something that you can take. So when you're going through compliance for your Azure Stack Hub, know that we've kind of validated these things correctly. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about, again, these are slides from VJ. It's just about managing multiple Azure Stacks. So as an operator, if you have multiple Azure Stacks, we have a fleet management solution with Operations Manager. That just means that it's something out the box that you can utilize. Of course, you can do the same thing by writing your own PowerShell or talking to the APIs. So it allows you to manage multiple Azure Stack systems. And then you can actually have that as the System Center Operations Manager actually feed up into your ticketing systems to really solve that data center integration. So the core principle is it works agentlessly. It uses the Azure Stack Hub APIs, support for connected and disconnected deployments, of course, support for multiple deployments, so you get a single management pane for managing multiple Azure Stacks. And it really just mirrors the admin portal and the PowerShell experiences I was showing you within System Center Operations Manager. And these are the capabilities of the MP. So just in summary, invest in all the operator training you can. I blasted through quite a lot of things there, so where you can, read the documentation, take the courses, take the certification, provide us feedback on that as we continually improve it. Automate, automate, automate. You know, the more you can build this into the workflows that you guys are familiar with in your data center and you're automating things to make your lives easier is critically important. And then turn on automatic log collection if you can. If you can't, just make sure you understand how log collection works. And then if you want to be part of the preview for the disconnected, sort of the on-premises diagnostics, please let me know. And with that, I'm out of time. So I will take questions after down here, but I would really appreciate your time and have a great evening. So thank you.